was really, I kind of wanted to spin it in a way in the discussion was, the value of these coaching clinics, right? It's the first one that I've been to live in, over 2 years. And I kind of become a coaching clinic, geek. Like, I don't think for a long time there, I hadn't missed the Roger Nilsson clinic in a long time. And certainly what the coaches site has done is, and obviously the USA Hockey level 4s and 5s are always, were always really exciting for me. But what the coaches site has done now, and I thought I just thought it would be a good group to have the discussion with, is, they've really kind of filled that niche of working with, I think, what they feel are the top level coaches, but their market, right, their focus is on youth coaches. And I guess the discussion, based off, and I can read some of the guys that spoke and some of the girls that spoke and some of the subject matter that went on. But I was just really, my feelings on this is, sometimes you go to these coaching clinics and all of you either spoke at them, for them and attended. And that's one of the things I've really been impressed about, right? Is that if you're going to these clinics and speaking, how many of the presenters actually sit through the whole clinic, and they're the most engaged. They're the ones always writing notes. They're the ones always taking notes. It's amazing to me. But really, the subject that I would love to talk about a little bit is just, how these coaching clinics relate to the bulk of the people you're going after, and that's youth coaches. And my feeling is sometimes they're way over their head. I know a lot of the guys that were at the coaching clinic for the coaches site out at the University of Michigan. There's probably at least 4 or 5 that I met that were at Daryl's clinic down in Florida. Daryl Belfry had his, I know Wally's mentioned his new podcast a little bit, but Daryl had his live session down in Florida. And I thought that was, again, the type of coaches that I met that were there, I'd be really hard pressed to see how they could take the information they got from that clinic and used it with their 8U and 9U players. So I'll just read you some of the guys that were speakers, which I thought were, again, I love the speakers, and I probably took these guys in maybe a little differently than maybe the other, another 200 set of coaches that were there. But Steve Spott spoke, Davis Payne, Paul McFarland, Mike Babcock spoke with his son, Michael, Todd Woodcroft, who's at the University of Vermont. He actually had two really good speeches, and I'll talk about the one that I enjoyed the most with him in the morning. David Barr came and spoke. Dan Muse from the U.S. NTDP program. Kara Mooney, Kara Morey spoke. I think Tim, I might have reached out to you on her, and she was actually fantastic. Her really well done presentation. Cam Abbott, and then on the ice, Brandon Naurato, which I know a lot of you guys know. Pat Malloy, Nathaniel Brooks. I think he's with Ryerson University. He was actually really good. Kim Weiss, who's actually an assistant coach with the Maryland Black Bears, which I believe is an NAHL team down here in the States. Brock Sheehan, and that's like one of the subjects I'd like to talk about is Brock talked about developing a youth hockey practice. Brock is the coach of the USHL's Chicago Steel, which follows a lot of principles of youth hockey. But I don't know if you saw the program, if it would value your 10U team. Joachim Bloom, who is pretty cool. He did an on-ice session. He works with I guess JRM Skating and Skills. So they had the music going in the rink and doing all kinds of flips and turns and doing circle drills on your elbow, all kinds of neat stuff. Leah Hextall spoke, who knows Sammy Joe very well. Bob Mancini, Mike Snee from College Hockey Inc., Dave Starman, and Chris Beach. Actually, I tried to get on here. Chris has a company in Vancouver called Aimability, which I thought I really enjoyed listening to him talk about. And then they had a bunch of other, John Bacon. I don't know if you guys have read Let Them Lead. He wrote a book on the taking the worst place. Hal, are they in Minnesota?
Who's that?
They had the worst place team, and in high school hockey, and went on to win. Went from worst to first there, and so he had a great story about players leading the charge, and then Brad Fast from Honeybake. So I thought, it was a 3-day clinic. There was a lot of information there. I thought Aaron Wilbur, who Wally knows, did a great job of mixing in, the classroom type environment and going over to Yost Arena and doing the on ice. But I think and then obviously he lets me do my director's club. I got to Gino Cavallini was out there selling a product for paperless score sheets. He had connected with a group out there, and there was a lot of vendors there as well, which was for somebody like me who does a lot of sales to teams was great. And then obviously Aaron allows me to do my or helps me facilitate my director's club program, and we did one live out there with Cam Paddock, who's out with North Vancouver Winter Club, maybe it is, or so I guess he has a lot of. He was talking about the the challenges of that. That's like a pretty exclusive club I gather to belong to, and I also had on that same broadcast we had Matt Deschamps, who's an assistant coach with the Chicago Steel, and Matty had played for me growing up, and played at the University of Maine, coached at Red Bull Salzburg for a little bit. Real good hockey people. So I guess from Wally, from my perspective, and again, not to be a salesperson for the coaches site, because I think a lot of, I don't know how many on the call belong to the site, but to me, it's like a great resource to take little bits and pieces. And I send a lot of this stuff out to the clients I work with and the youth programs I work with. But I think from a perspective of a youth hockey coach, it's maybe just having the conversation about what the value is of going to a clinic like this, and then what recommendations would we give, especially from people that speak at these things all the time, to give to programs that could help better frame and what they're doing for the youth hockey community. I could certainly see a lot of the stuff that went on helping junior hockey, college hockey, pro hockey, a lot of stuff that Woodcroft talked about, and some of the NTTP program guys, Chicago Steel guys, really was based on teams having hours and hours and hours of ice and resources, and the opportunity to have the rink to themselves at all hours of the day. And I don't know how exactly that transfers to the youth hockey environment that often we talk about, and about that base of if we're going to make better players, we've got to help make better coaches. And I will say that the overriding theme of the 3 days that I was there really came down to communication. And it's funny how Wally brought up the mission statement part, is that you could hear in all of these presentations coaches talked about, a lot of it had to do with what kind of culture they had set up. Dave Barr actually had a great speech on that, and Kara Mori talked about what she's done with her players and how they got them to believe and gain some grit, and really just have that piece in the back of their head that the communication aspect was so important. And I think my honest opinion is that I think that's where we lack the most at the youth hockey level. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I mean, it's certainly something that if you're a member, you'll have access to all those presentations anyway, because they'll start to, they'll edit them and put them on the site. And again, I thought it was a great opportunity to see people finally, face to face. And my value from a lot of these clinics, most of the time, is the time that I'm not in the clinic, that I'm out, speaking with the other coaches and the people that are attending these programs, and just having these conversations offline, based off of some of the matter that was given to the clinic. So I'll leave it at that for now, but if you have any questions. But I think it's I think it was a really great opportunity for me, just as a coach that works with a lot of coaches, to hear a ton of other content, But I think selfishly, I think those 3 days was no different than what we do here on this call, and a lot of the conversations that we have, and really valuing these great, the great hockey people that you have in the room together.
And Mike, it is a great group, and as you were speaking, and you're the only one with hair that's still the original color. Just about every one of us has been to multiple coaching clinics over the years, and the biggest not a concern, but I'm always curious about what will people take away that they will apply and make useful for their coaching environment. And you're working with youth hockey and associations like many of us have, and Tim's working with international female hockey, and I'm not actively coaching. Health still is. So when you go to a clinic like this, I'm really curious if there's anything you are going to take away and hands-on experiment with sooner than later.
Yeah, well, I think for me, like the opportunity to be there and speak to the presenters off of their subject, and like Todd Woodcroft was great. Like we were joking around. One of his presentations he did in the morning that was actually sponsored by Huddle, which is the company that does a lot of the video editing and housing of all this video for these pro coaches and college coaches. And Todd was just talking about the need for video and how much they use it. And one of the kids he brought was his video coach from UVM, which I thought was fantastic that he brought this young guy who by the way had never played hockey, didn't know anything about hockey, just knew how to sort video and loved computers. And he gave him a job as their video guy, and he's really taken to it. But I think one of the funny things for me was how this person who had nothing to do in the hockey world, wasn't a player, was really one of the highest level people at the clinic, working with the highest level athletes in the program. So it just reaffirmed to me, how many other things there are out there other than being a player and a coach, that you could be active in the sport of hockey, and how there's just tons of opportunity for young girls and boys to not only have to aspire to be, a head coach or a player at the Division I level. But I know Tom had his hand up. Yeah.
Tom, your speaker.
There you go.
Yeah, I've probably attended more clinics than anybody in the world, because I went to every Hockey Canada one. They used to have one every 2 years, and then they stopped doing it. Then the hockey site, and but I go to international ones. I really love the international ones. So I've done Bratislava, Vienna, Prague, Helsinki, and other places. And the neat thing about them is you get tickets each night to go watch games. And they don't go crazy either. They just go till like 4 p.m, and they realize that one of the benefits is being there with coaches and that you can talk, because the Hockey Canada ones used to be nuts. I remember Johanny came to one in Calgary, the last one in Calgary, and they started off at our breakfast. There's a guy talking, and we went to 10 at night. And he said, "Are you North Americans crazy? You think you're going to learn everything about hockey in 3 days?" Yeah. And yeah, so I just like it because you get really the feel of the European hockey and the teams chanting, and there's always a big, huge tent outside and beer gardens, and screen to watch the game, and a lot of them in places like Bratislava, the old town. Everybody goes down there in the old town, and they're singing their songs, and the different countries, and wearing their jerseys, and so that's an added thing, and it's probably cheaper to pay for the conference and go, because you get the tickets, plus they feed you a couple of times a day and a big discount on the rooms. And, so I was going to go to the one in Finland this year, but I was a little nervous. The Russians might shoot us out of the air, so I didn't go. But just thought I'd throw that in. They're really beneficial. And what I do is I take snapshots of the PowerPoint presentations, because they used to give a handout, but now they basically do PowerPoint presentations. And, there'd always be a handout, and then everybody would contribute a drill. And then some committee would pick out on different topics, and some committee would choose what they thought were the best ones and then put them together and give you a package. And I thought that was a kind of an added bonus there too. So yeah, that's my 2 bits worth here.
Yeah, no, but I think you're right, Tom. I mean, one of the things that I would love, and when you go to these things, I think you get so much more value out of the time away from the presentation than you do in the presentation. So having, and we talk about this all the time just in teaching, right? I mean, if you're going to sit there for 8 hours in an auditorium and listen to, one good thing Aaron did do, I think, in this format was all the speakers only did like 25 minutes. It wasn't like a 50-minute presentation.
He started doing that about 5 years ago with the coaches site ones, like in Vancouver. I went to a bunch.
Yeah. Because
you sit there for hours. It's really tough.
Yeah, and for like somebody like me, and getting back to Wally's point, like what can you take away? Like if Kara gave her presentation and then they did a breakout room and said, okay, anybody that's interested in this subject can go to this other room and actually speak and talk and interact with the speakers and the person and that subject that you wanted to hear. I would think like that to me, and that's why, how like a lot of the USA hockey stuff I love is because of the fact that they've done like these, like you could sign up, like you do your level 5 in USA hockey and you're in the whole presentation, but then you can sign up for breakout presentations. So sure. If you're there and you're an 8U coach or a midget coach, you're splitting, like you're not listening to the same subject matter. You can go off to the subject that you're most interested in. But I agree with you, Tom. It's like the great opportunity to be able to sit and actually talk to the person who's presenting and grab knowledge out of them. It's so much easier now. Like even me, I meet so many coaches just on Twitter, just sending them a direct message and asking them a question. And people are so great about returning information because I think they're so much more accessible than they were in the past. But from my use, like if I'm thinking about how can I digest this and then bring this to my youth hockey communities that I work with, is really difficult because a lot of the stuff's not transferable.
Yeah, that's true. But a lot of it is you can take it down a little. I found that the international conferences were a lot of stuff more directed at, youth hockey and how to coach.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. That I think, it's funny because I was just in Helsinki a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking the same thing when you see the map on the plane and you see St. Petersburg is right there. You're like, all right, well, I'm getting in and getting out, but it is. I love that the fact that and Europe, and there was a lot of Europeans over here as well. By the way, there was a lot of Scandinavians and Europeans over in Michigan. I bet you they'd made up 10% or more of the conference for them coming here and listening to these speakers that they have on tap as well.
Yeah, I was at one in Germany. Can't remember the city, but anyways, the Swedes had a bus full of coaches came, like 50 coaches. And that's what they wanted to change the way they were coaching. And they all came to it. Then they'd meet, to come up with, how we can adapt this into our programs.
Tom, I wanted to comment as you're talking. Having been at so many clinics, I've had more spontaneous things happen that have affected me for the rest of my coaching life than I did from a clinic. So, and the one of them I'll bring up because Tom is on. I just walked into the arena when his friend Johanny Walson was on the ice, and he did a passing sequence to teach eye contact and timing that to this day is off the wall. and it's something that youth coaches can do. And I've adapted it into doing coaching clinics, built it into the ice time, my clinic, but it's something to me that merits being done at the right age and the right stuff, right amount, right time, and Tim's right way applied. And I'm curious, Hal and Tim, the number of coaching clinics that you've gone to, and what were some of your greatest ever takeaways, or were they like mine, where you just happened in on a practice, or you sat down and had coffee with somebody? So, Hal, can you comment on from your experience?
Sure. So, I think I'm a veteran of the USA Hockey Clinic program, having gone through the original. I used to call it the master class. It was in 1983 or 4. You had to get invited to go to it. Now all you have to do is sign up and pay a lot of money. But I went to maybe 4 or 5 of the IHF clinics. That's where I first met Tom. It might have been in Prague. I don't remember, or I can't remember what. That's when we first met in person. And the one in Prague had Ludek Bukac was a speaker, and then we went to the ice, and he showed what he was doing to develop quick hands, quick feet, and all that stuff, and he called it the Variable Goals Training Program. And that made a big impression on me. In fact, I still use a lot of that stuff. And Mike, I've got a couple videos of it on YouTube if you want to take a look at it. It has, to me, brings a couple things. One is that the kids in the United States, they've never seen this stuff before, right? And we know that most kids are pretty bored with the same 10 or 12 drills that they've been running forever and ever. And they're very challenging for them, and they really, really have fun doing them, and you can adapt them and do some stuff. But the other thing about, I think, can't remember if we were in, I don't remember which clinic, but all those clinics in Europe bring in non-hockey people, and there was the one from the French Track Federation that was talking about, lactic acid. And, we always talk about lactic acid is what slows down our legs. And they go, that's not true at all. There's nothing to do with it. And the research and the science they put into stuff. So what happens when you get tired is your brain goes into defense, and it recruits less muscle fiber to do the work because it's conserving. And world-class athletes can override that. Young people can too. They can override it by just having good mental conversations. I'm not tired. Come on, and you can train yourself to do that, because it's sort of like the what is it, Louise and whatever her name it were driving their car over the cliff, that movie, right? And your brain's kind of going, no, we're going over the cliff. You're losing energy. And it goes into a defensive mode, and you can train yourself out of that. So I just always, and then they brought in, I think one year they brought in the guys from, I think it's called the Blacks or whatever, the rugby team in Australia.
The All Blacks.
The All Blacks, right? And to talk about their team culture. That was a really cool presentation. You never see that here. Well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't been to a USA Hockey one for a number of years. But Mike, I think your assessment of the clinics are that they are pretty high level, and majority of translating that information and taking it down to squirts, peewees, or whatever is, it's a whole different deal, right? And I see guys go to that and they go, all right, we're going to use. I had a guy tell me that he taught his U12 team, the Winnipeg system, the Winnipeg Jets system, because that was his favorite team. I'm going, well, what about skating and passing and stuff like? No, we just play their system. So I don't know. There's no perfect way. There's no right way. Guys like you, Mike, are doing a great job carrying the water and sharing the gospel. And I did it for a long time, but I get tired after a while. So
No, you're
actually got,
Al, I think you're right though about, but you see, I think that's the difference, right? And some coaches and the people that come to these clinics,